friends. This is another episode of the program Empire of Lies, in which we talk about manipulation and disinformation of the Russian media. American ultimatum or Kremlin trap. In the latest episode of 60 Minutes by Skabeeva, Russian television propaganda presented new sensations around the statements of Donald Trump. The plot centers on the idea that it is the United States, not Ukraine, that will decide the conditions for ending the war, and the Kiev government itself is allegedly doomed and incompetent. Ukraine, as a victim of wrong decisions, Russian broadcast persistently repeats the thesis. Ukraine never had a chance to win because Russia is 15 times stronger. Zelensky is portrayed as a political adventurer drawn into the war by the incompetent Biden. The meaning is clear. It is not Moscow that started the aggression that is to blame, but the Ukrainian government, which believed in victory and brought the country to disaster. The threat of sanctions against Ukraine. The main bomb of the broadcast was Trump's words about the US imposing duties and sanctions not only against Russia, but also against Ukraine. In the Russian interpretation, this looks like a punishment for Kyiv's unwillingness to give in. In fact, this is an attempt to impose on the Europeans the idea that if Ukraine does not give in, its allies will also put pressure on it. This is an important point. Moscow expects that fear of American pressure on Kiev will undermine the unity of Europe. US officials have told their European counterparts that Washington is prepared to provide strategic enablers, including intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance, command and control, and air defense capabilities to underpin any European-led ground deployment. The US offer is contingent on European capitals committing to station tens of thousands of troops in Ukraine, and the deal could still be scrapped, officials say. How exactly would security guarantees work? Actually, that's one of the things. I can't help but chuckle. It's a dark joke, but they want to be part of the peacekeeping force. It's funny, because they would be the ones preventing a Russian invasion, which is kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? Lavrov is joking. He's not serious. The Russians won't be involved. Maybe there will be transparency requirements for both sides about movements within certain borders. We've seen that in other parts of the world. Maybe that's what he meant by participation. But as far as real security guarantees for the Ukrainians, there will be no Russian involvement. The plan to ensure stability in Ukraine after the war was presented to Zelensky by two commanders-in-chief of the British Armed Forces, the Chief of the Defence Staff, Admiral Tony Radakin, and his successor, Air Chief Marshal Richard Knighton. It takes two to tango. A lot of attention is paid to the statements of Trump and his special envoy, Steve Witkow, about a peace deal by the end of the year. The formula is openly named, territory in exchange for security guarantees. The tactics are clear, to present a compromise as a ready-made US project and shift responsibility for the failure onto Zelensky. Russian talk shows portrayed Trump as a man tired of Ukraine, who forced Europe to pay the bills and now demands concessions from Kiev. New security architecture, a disguised dictate. The presentation of the West's plans is especially revealing. The studio talks about Ukraine's three-stage defense system, from a demilitarized zone under the control of peacekeepers to a European deterrent corps under the cover of US aviation. All of this is presented as absurd. What kind of peacekeepers are there from countries that are fighting on the side of Kyiv? Lavrov asks ironically. The goal is obvious, to convince the viewer that any Western guarantees are fiction, and real peace is possible only on the Kremlin's terms. Europe between fear and fatigue. Propaganda actively cites doubts within the EU, the Germans' reluctance to send troops, splits in the positions of Paris and London, statements that the sanctions potential has been exhausted. Russia is trying to convince us that Europe is tired, putting pressure on Moscow is pointless, and it is time to seek a compromise at any cost. You were on the program Empire of Lies. See you soon.